Thank you for joining me here on the last segment of today's show. Just going through a last minute injury news roundup on some of the biggest injuries here to some of the big name players, right? You see it there on your screen. Rashee Rice, Malik Nabers, and Jonathan Taylor. Some of the biggest injuries that we have to deal with now, these teams have to deal with now in Week 5 of the NFL. So starting off with one of the biggest ones, we mentioned Rashee Rice before, and the troubles that the Chiefs are going to have without him, right? Because he was really starting to kind of step into that role as being the guy for the Chiefs, right? And it was great to see, right? With when Travis Kelce wasn't performing to start the year, and you just didn't know who was going to step up. Xavier Worthy had a great first game, and it almost overshadowed what Rashee Rice did as well. But he has constantly been a consistent weapon for Patrick Mahomes. He was his go-to guy, and unfortunately, he got hurt. And like I said before, we don't really know exactly what the injury diagnosis is, but we do know that yesterday the Chiefs head coach Andy Reid announced that Rashee Rice will be going on the injured reserve at least for now. So it does mean that he's going to be out the next 4 games at least. And it's been since last Sunday where we heard that Rashee Rice was going to get further tests. There was going to be an update at some point after their last game against the Chargers to kind of give a better assessment of this injury and the timetable for him as well. But that obviously hasn't happened. Head coach Andy Reid said that they're waiting for the swelling to go down before they do any more tests on him. But at worst case scenario, it looks like an ACL injury. So, that would obviously end his season. And now it could be something a little bit less severe. I don't want to get anyone's hopes up or anything, but reports yesterday from the Chiefs say that Rashee Rice had a full sleeve on that right leg of his, but was moving without crutches or anything like that. He just had that brace or sleeve, I guess, on his right leg. So, take it as you will, take it with a grain of salt, but at least he's not like walking around with crutches and things like that. He's moving around by himself. So that's at least a little bit better. I'm sure we're going to get a clearer answer at some point next week, but that's Rashee Rice and that update as well. Elsewhere, we look at the Giants wide receiver Malik Nabers. He was first placed on the injury watch coming off of the game on last Thursday against the Dallas Cowboys. On that game where they lost, he had a big night, but it was towards the end of the game where all the big stars got hurt. Micah got hurt, DeMarcus Lawrence got hurt, and Malik Nabers suffered a concussion in that game as well. And because of that, he's obviously a big part of their offense, right? That goes without saying. And he was still going through the protocol, and it came to, I think, yesterday where I think it was Ian Rappaport that reported that Malik Nabers, faced an uphill battle to play this week because he just hadn't gone out of the protocol yet. We were into this week already, and then this morning, the head coach of the Giants, Brian Daboll, officially ruled out Malik Nabers with that concussion. He missed most of the days in practice and probably hasn't cleared the attempted or the protocol yet for the concussion. So he has already been ruled out, and the Giants are going to face the Seahawks, a very good Seahawks team, without their best player on offense, I'll say. I was going to say their best player in general, but they got other guys. But still on offense, it's going to be interesting to see how the Giants kind of work around that now, certainly. So that's one thing as well. Elsewhere, you look at the Indianapolis Colts, and I mentioned in this report that I wrote up that we were going to have a better understanding of Anthony Richardson and where he was at. He was dealing with an oblique injury after last week's game against Pittsburgh, where he got hit. Initially, the first hit affected his oblique, and he was out for a couple of plays. And he actually came back, and then he took another big hit to the head, and he was out for the remainder of the game. And now, thankfully, it's only really been that oblique injury, and he has been officially listed as questionable leading up into their next game against the Tennessee Titans. But unfortunately for their other injured player, their other star, Jonathan Taylor, he suffered a high ankle sprain last week again against the Steelers towards the end of that game, and he has not practiced at all this week, and he has been already officially been ruled out for this upcoming game against the Titans. He was dealing with that high ankle sprain. There was reports by Ian Rappaport that mentioned that mentioned that Jonathan Taylor is likely to miss some time, not even just this week. He said some time with this injury, and high ankle sprains are tough. They're tough because there's different grades to these ankle sprains, and I never really understand what they mean, if I'm being honest. But you have different severity levels for them, and we saw Micah Parsons, injured with a high ankle sprain, and you just never know. I feel like with ankles or like hamstring injuries, things like that, what it's really going to be like, how long they're going to be out, or how close to 100% they're going to be, and what kind of state they're going to be in going forward. So that's going to be a tough loss for them, running the ball with this great offensive line. The Titans haven't been so hot, they're 1-3, so maybe you feel a little bit comfortable with him missing this game, but I think it's just going forward that it does become a little bit dicey because you don't want him to be out for too long. That's going to be a guy you obviously need to have out there for this Colts team. Elsewhere, we look at some of the official injury designations we have with some of these teams. We look at the New York Jets officially ruling out Morgan Moses. CJ Mosley is doubtful with still that toe injury that has kept him out for the last 2 weeks now. It looks like he's going to miss a third straight game. TJ Hockenson was on the injury report for the Vikings, but he's actually, I think, coming back, I think this week or next week, officially to practice after recovering from that ACL injury and being activated off of the PUP list. So that's positive, but he's not going to play again, obviously. Then we look at the Houston Texans now, and they're dealing with an interesting situation because on their official injury report, they have already ruled out Joe Mixon, and they haven't ruled out, or they have Dameon Pierce listed as questionable right now, which, again, it leaves the door open, but they're not going to have Joe Mixon now for a third straight game as well, and it's going to be a huge miss, like I mentioned before, with facing the Buffalo Bills. And I think through the first 2 weeks that I saw Joe Mixon play, as good as Tank Dell and as good as Nico and Stephon Diggs are, when Joe Mixon is playing, this Texans team, you really get to see how good they can be, because if he's running the ball as efficiently as he was to start the year, you can't do anything, almost, it feels like, honestly, in the simplest terms, because you can't just stop him with a light box, and then you try to load up the box even more, and any of those monsters can beat you on the outside. So that's where I really see the difference in what this Houston Texans team could really be. So unfortunately, he's going to be out. On their injury report as well, they have their defensive end, Derek Barnett, out as well. Jerry Hughes is not going to be playing. And Robert Woods is listed as questionable as well. In some of these other news, some pretty notable ones are for the Baltimore Ravens. Pretty healthy injury report, so actually nothing to report there. The Bengals, on the other hand, playing the Baltimore Ravens, it doesn't look like they're going to have their defensive tackle Sheldon Rankins back yet, which is huge. He's listed as doubtful with a hamstring injury still, so not having him in the middle of your defensive line, it's going to be trouble, to say the least, against Derrick Henry, so that's a pretty big miss. Mike Hilton is listed as questionable, and that's pretty much it for the significant injuries there. The Dolphins are going through it, man. Jordan Poyer, their safety, is doubtful with a shin injury, and they already ruled out Jalen Phillips for the remainder of 2024 with a knee injury. So those are the pretty massive ones there. I'm not even going to go into the Patriots because almost all of their team is questionable. It's nuts what I'm looking at now. So I'm going to move on to the Browns. Nick Chubb obviously not playing. He came back to practice, which is a great sign, but he's not ready to play whatsoever. David Njoku is a little bit positive. He's listed as questionable after he was limited on Wednesday, but didn't practice at all yesterday. So he's listed as questionable on their injury report, and their two offensive tackles are also listed as questionable. They desperately need Jack Conklin and Jedrick Wills to come back with their each of their respective injuries. Joseph Fig, how you doing? Welcome to the show. And lastly here for the Commanders, no injury designation on Brian Robinson, which is huge news. for the Commanders, because Brian Robinson has been very good for them over the last couple weeks now, running the ball very efficiently, and he actually didn't practice again yesterday. He didn't practice on Wednesday and didn't practice on Thursday, so he has no injury designation from what I'm reading, so that's great news. It probably means he is going to play, and I love that because he's on my fantasy team as well. So Brian Robinson looks like he's going to play, and also, lastly here, I will mention the 49ers. George Kittle and Fred Warner didn't practice again yesterday. They're pretty much both questionable heading into their game against the Cardinals. And obviously, two guys you want to see play. Head coach Kyle Shanahan mentioned how they're two players that don't necessarily need to practice to play. So, there's that aspect of it, but it is still big misses, right? Fred Warner, your quarterback of your defense, and George Kittle, a big piece of your offense. So those guys are the last kind of injury news we're going to get to on today's show, and that'll wrap it up for today's episode. Thank you guys for joining. Please remember to like, follow, and subscribe to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast, and follow and go check out more of the content around this show on both the YouTube channels, the Podcast Network channel, and the GSMC Sports Network channel to find more NFL coverage, but in a variety of different ways on there for you guys to go check out. And lastly, make sure to tune in every weekday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time for more reactions, breaking news, coverage around the NFL as well, with me, Manny Maradiaga, as your host. Thanking you for joining me here. Hope you guys have a great weekend. Go watch the football games, and we'll come back on Monday to discuss all of them when we get there.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna go to